After a holiday that was supposed to be filled with joy turned into a nightmare, the Parker family returned home with a stronger resolve than ever. They not only wanted to find justice for themselves, but also hoped their story would help drive social change. For Ethan and Lena, the fight was far from over. It was only just beginning. This is part 2 of the story about the Parker family's journey of struggle against injustice and discrimination. If you have not read part 1, click the link in the description to catch up on the gripping start of the saga. Before beginning the story, I would like to extend my deepest gratitude to the audience who followed part 1 and left such wonderful feedback on the story. Please subscribe to the channel to follow more exciting content. The Parker family stepped off the plane with tense expressions, each carrying their own private pain, but united in the determination not to let the matter pass in silence. The holiday had ended in the worst possible way, but Lena and Ethan knew they had to turn this experience into motivation to fight for justice, not only for themselves, but also for others facing discrimination. As soon as they arrived home, Lena went straight to her study, clearing off her desk to prepare for the legal battle ahead. She meticulously reviewed each video recorded by tourists at the resort, organizing every small detail, each piece of evidence a part of the injustice her family had endured. Meanwhile, Ethan could not stop thinking about the incident. As an FBI agent, he had once thought he understood the justice system inside and out, but now he found himself a victim of the very injustices he'd only previously read about in reports or heard about from colleagues. Both Lena and Ethan deeply felt the weight of what they were about to undertake. While Lena planned their legal strategy, Ethan reached out to colleagues and human rights organizations, asking them to share the family's story across media platforms. They also received many calls from others who had faced similar situations, expressing their support and encouraging them to keep fighting. Ethan understood that with every piece of evidence Lena found, and with every show of support they received, their strength only grew. Meanwhile, Jackson and Emily were still young and could not fully grasp what the family was facing. Jackson, their eldest, noticed the change in his parents. He asked innocent questions about what had happened and why their family had been treated that way. Lena had to reassure him, gently explaining injustice and discrimination. She hugged him tightly, promising that they would not let anyone else go through this kind of pain. Seeing his family more united than ever, Ethan felt a powerful drive to continue. He knew this was not just a lawsuit. It was a fight for justice, defending the values he had spent his life upholding. The Parker family was ready to take on the legal battle with all their determination. Ethan had not slept all night, and as the sun rose he was prepared for the fight he knew would be lengthy and challenging. Looking over at Lena, who had been by his side through it all, he saw the determination in her eyes. They were not just fighting for their family. They were fighting for a greater cause, to expose injustice and send a message about fairness. That very morning, Lena started reaching out to her colleagues in the legal field. She was not only seeking legal support, but also hoped the family's story would spread, attracting public attention. in the interest of human rights organizations. Ethan did not hesitate either, sending details about their case to NGOs and journalists focused on discrimination issues. They both knew that, for the lawsuit to have a larger impact, they would need support from the community and international organizations. Day by day, their phones and email inboxes buzzed constantly, with encouraging messages from friends, colleagues, and even strangers. People who had been victims of discrimination shared their own painful stories, thanking the Parkers for standing up. Many said that the family story had given them strength, helping them feel less alone in their fight for justice and human rights. Meanwhile, responses began coming in from the resort and the police department. The resort's legal team sent emails filled with defensive language, blaming security procedures for questioning the family, insisting it was done to ensure the safety of other guests. These responses only strengthened Lena and Ethan's resolve. They realize this fight was not just about getting justice for themselves, but also challenging a deeply flawed system. Lena was well aware that she and Ethan were up against powerful forces, but rather than deter her, it only made her more determined. Lena spent countless nights working tirelessly, watching and rewatching the video evidence Tourist had captured, arranging it by timeline, and drafting detailed notes for every moment that took place at the resort. She wanted to make sure that each piece of evidence would be presented clearly and irrefutably. Ethan, although used to high-pressure situations, in his work with the FB, found himself feeling deeply emotional and angered as he reviewed the videos, especially when he saw Emily's fearful expression and Jackson's confusion. The sight reminded him that this fight was not only about justice, but also about protecting his family's dignity. As Lena and Ethan threw themselves into the lawsuit, their story began to spread widely across social media. Hashtags like Us Justice for the Parkers and was Stand Against Discrimination attracted thousands of supporters. Social media users shared the Parkers' story, expressing outrage and calling for justice. Well-known activist for human rights and anti-racism began speaking up, urging human rights organizations to follow the case closely to ensure the Parker family would receive fair treatment. While everyone was busy preparing for the lawsuit, Jackson, Lena, and Ethan's 12-year-old son started to understand more about what was happening around him. From a naive boy, he began to ask questions Ethan found difficult to answer lightly. "Dad, why are people treating us like this?" Jackson asked, his innocent eyes now reflecting an unwilling maturity. Ethan looked at his son, heartbroken by what Jackson had been forced to witness. He tried to explain, "You see, son, sometimes people are afraid of things they do not understand, and they judge based on appearances instead of character. But we will not let them decide our worth." Ethan's answer reassured Jackson to some extent, but he could still see worry in his son's eyes. Lena noticed the impact this was having on Jackson, more than she had anticipated, and she decided to help him understand the importance of this fight. Every evening when the family gathered together, Lena and Ethan took time to talk with their children, helping them understand that this battle was not about revenge, but about fairness and standing up for everyone's rights. The Parker family's determination became an inspiration. For many others, the words of encouragement, shared stories and community support became the motivation they needed to continue on this difficult journey. Lena felt that this was not just her case. It was an opportunity to stand up for everyone who had suffered injustice. As for Ethan, he realized that this fight had become a mission, not only to protect his family, but also to affirm the values of justice. He had devoted his life to. The Parkers' legal battle was now far more meaningful than they had initially imagined. They were not only fighting for justice for themselves, but they were standing up for the voiceless in society. For Lena, this was an opportunity to bring justice to families suffering discrimination. Ethan knew he would do everything he could to protect his children and help them understand that, in life, justice is not given freely but must be fought for. With perseverance and courage, the Parker family not only faced injustice, but now found themselves up against powerful, experienced forces skilled in handling legal crises. As their case gained attention from the public and human rights organizations, the resort and police department quickly responded with strong defensive strategies. Ethan and Lennon knew this was a sensitive moment, and any misstep could cost them public support. Just days after Lena filed the case, the resort's legal team responded aggressively. Long formal letters filled with hedge language poured in continuously to Lena and her legal team. Each document emphasized that the resort staff had only followed standard security procedures. When asking the Parkers for information and identification, some of the opposing documents even suggested that the Parkers themselves had caused disruption at the resort, negatively affecting other guest experiences. Lena immediately recognized that the defendants were trying to shift blame onto the victims to divert public attention. This not only angered Lena, but fueled her fighting spirit. She spent countless hours reviewing each piece of evidence, cross-referencing with legal standards, and preparing solid counter-arguments. Lena also reached out to trusted legal colleagues, discussing how best to present their case transparently and understandably to the public. She knew this was no longer a personal lawsuit. It was a battle for justice on behalf of everyone who had suffered discrimination. At the same time, Ethan was preparing for his role, supporting Lena by gathering testimonies from people who had been at the resort that day and scrutinizing documents sent by the opposing side. He knew that every small detail could help protect his family and clarify the truth in court. With his experience as an agent, Ethan was fully aware that their opponents would create as many challenges as possible to weaken the case, and he was determined not to let them succeed. Simultaneously, the resort's lawyers focused not only on the legal battle, but also launched media campaigns to protect their public image. Articles, statements, and campaigns began surfacing, emphasizing that the resort was committed to ensuring the safety of all guests and had no intention of discrimination. Some articles even suggested that the Parker family might have been overly sensitive, or that they were possibly trying to draw attention to themselves. This deeply hurt Lena and Ethan, making them realize that public opinion could be a double-edged sword, and they needed to carefully manage their public image. The negative reactions from a portion of the public took a toll on the Parker family, especially on Jackson and Emily, Jackson, 12, began feeling confused and pressured, as some friends and acquaintances made conflicting comments about his family story. He could not understand why something he had experienced firsthand was being coldly and insensitively judged by others. "Mom, why do not people believe us?" Jackson asked, with a look of both confusion and disappointment. Lena hugged her son, trying to reassure him that sometimes the truth is not easily accepted, and that the road to justice is always fraught with misunderstanding. Realizing the situation was becoming more complicated, the Parker family decided not to back down. Lena understood that to overcome the resort's media campaigns, she would need to partner with journalists, human rights activists, and influential figures in the community to make sure their story was told honestly and fairly. She began collaborating with journalists experienced in human rights issues, providing them with detailed information about the case, and ensuring they had access to evidence and witnesses. Meanwhile, social activists and Ningos began expressing strong support for the Parkers on social media. Hashtags like Shroud Justice for the Parkers and Stand Against Discrimination became popular and gathered thousands of shares. Many sent the Parkers messages of encouragement and shared their own stories, expressing empathy and gratitude that the family was courageously standing up. This support not only motivated them, but also reinforced their confidence. And knowing they were doing the right thing, the Parker family's fight was now not only against the resort or the police department, but also against conflicting public opinion and the complexity of social media. Their story had become a test of not just legal prowess, but also faith, perseverance, and the strength of family unity. Lena and Ethan, though facing increasingly intense challenges, were determined not to give up. They believed that if they could get through this, they would not only regain justice for themselves, but also help move society toward a more positive and just path. When the first day of the trial finally arrived, the Parker family entered the courtroom with a mix of readiness and anxiety. This was the day they'd prepared for over many weeks, facing not only top-notch lawyers, but also polarized public opinion. Lena and Ethan knew that the battle in court was not only about winning legally, but also about exposing the truth to the public and making a powerful statement about justice and human rights. Camera flashes from the press and media captured every moment as the Parkers entered the courtroom, prepared to face the defendants. As they stepped inside, Lena held Ethan's hand tightly and took in the packed room. Journalists, family, supporters, and even those against them filled the room. Lena took a deep breath, studied herself, and prepared for her opening argument. As the lawyer representing her family, she would have to face the resort's legal team, which had prepared complex arguments and sharp rhetoric to defend their client's reputation. Lena knew this would be an intense and challenging confrontation. Across from her, the resorts and police department's legal team stood in a row, dressed impeccably in suits, with expressions of seriousness and confidence. They began their defense by presenting arguments based on security regulations and the resort's duty to protect its property. They emphasized that the request for the Parkers' IDs was merely part of the security process for all guests. They even presented testimony from security personnel, who asserted that the Parkers had overreacted and created unnecessary conflict. On the day of the incident, Lena listened carefully to these accusations, noting each weak point in the opposing arguments. When it was her turn, she stood, her gaze filled with confidence and resolve. Speaking in a clear and rational tone, Lena presented irrefutable evidence she had gathered. Videos taken by tourists were shown to the court, revealing that the Parker family had cooperated fully with security and had not caused any disruption. In the footage, the stern demeanor and disrespectful approach of the security staff were unmistakable, causing many in the courtroom to feel uncomfortable. Ethan was called up as a witness. He recounted in detail the situation his family had faced, from his children's fearful expressions to the humiliation he and Lena had endured. He struggled to maintain composure, but recalling Emily's panic in Jackson's confusion made his voice waver. "I've dedicated my career to upholding justice and security in this country," Ethan said, his voice filled with emotion. "But now my own family has become a victim of the discrimination and injustice. I've spent my life fighting against." His words brought silence to the courtroom, and many attendees averted their eyes in emotion, the opposing side feeling the weight of Lena's evidence and Ethan's heartfelt testimony began to lose their initial confidence. The resort's legal team tried to counter, claiming the video provided only a limited perspective and did not capture the entire context. They even called several witnesses to assert that the resort always strictly adheres to security protocols and that there had been no discriminatory actions. However, with each defense argument, the audience in the courtroom grew more dissatisfied. Lena continued to expose weaknesses in the defendants' arguments, gradually dismantling their ambiguities and forcing them to confront the truth. She emphasized that security protocols could not excuse violations of personal rights or discriminatory actions. As a skilled attorney, Lena used every piece of evidence and testimony to demonstrate that discrimination was undeniable and that the resort must be held accountable for its employees' actions. When the hearing concluded, the room was filled with tension and anticipation. Both sides had made their strongest arguments, and the judge adjourned to review the evidence and prepare for the next sessions. The Parkers left the courtroom to murmurs from the crowd. In the watchful eyes of the media, Ethan and Lena held their children's hands, feeling the pressure of this battle, but also feeling more resolute than ever. The first day of trial had come to an end, but the Parker family knew that the road ahead was still long and full of obstacles. Support they saw from those in the courtroom, and the public outside strengthened their resolve, making them ready for the upcoming sessions. For Lena and Ethan, this fight was about more than justice. It was about sending a message that no one has the right to treat others unfairly based on appearance or race, and that justice is always worth fighting for until the very end. The following trial session opened with tension filling the courtroom. Both sides knew that the battle had grown fiercer than ever following Lena's powerful rebuttal and Ethan's sincere testimony. The resort's legal team altered their strategy, no longer focusing solely on security protocols, but instead delving into minor details to undermine the Parkers' credibility. and create public doubt about their motives. The resort's attorneys began by questioning the authenticity of some evidence provided by the Parkers. They argued that the video clips had been edited, selectively chosen, did not provide a complete view of the entire situation. One of their attorneys directed the judge's attention to time gaps in the footage, implying that other situations could have taken place off camera. They even brought in witnesses from the resort to state that they had not observed any discrimination on that day. Lena, sitting next to Ethan, could clearly sense the intent from the opposing side. She knew they were deliberately trying to sow doubt, to devalue the evidence. However, Lena remained unfazed when it was her turn to counter. She stood up and used a confident voice to defend the transparency of the evidence her family had presented. She laid out each timeline, analyzed each moment in the video, and demonstrated that everything aligned with the testimonies of the Parker family and other witnesses they had previously called. However, the resort's legal team did not give up. They shifted focus to questioning the Parker family's motives, implying that they're bringing the matter to the media and drawing public attention might be financially motivated or intended to build an image. They even mentioned that the Parker family had received support from human rights organizations and well-known activists, subtly suggesting that this may have distorted the truth or given the Parkers motives beyond justice. This line of attack caused murmurs to ripple through the courtroom. Ethan felt anger and resentment rise within him as he saw his family questioned and insulted. But Lena remained calm, knowing this was the moment to show her sincerity and resolve. She gently stood up, looked directly at the panel in audience, and said, "My family is not here today for any personal gain. We are here because we believe in justice, and we want our children to grow up in a fair society where everyone is respected and treated equally." Her words were not just a defense, but a profound message to all those observing the case. Lena's rational arguments touched many in the courtroom. She went on to clarify that the support the Parker family received from human rights organizations was a testament to the injustice they had endured, and that this support did not mean her family was seeking personal gain. "The truth we are seeking cannot be distorted by any pressure," Lena said, her gaze resolute, "and we will continue to pursue it to the end." Seeing Lena's unwavering confidence, the resort's lawyers gradually began to lose their footing. However, they did not stop trying to counter. In one last attempt, they called a long-time resort employee as a witness, who stated that the resort had a zero-tolerance policy for any discriminatory behavior. But Lena, with her sharp experience, quickly pointed out that this policy was not consistently enforced, and that the Parker family itself was evidence of that system's failure. The confrontation between the two sides continued until the end of the trial session, as the resort's legal team ran out of arguments and resorted to vague defenses to prolong the time. The Parker family, though feeling exhausted, held strong with their belief in justice and the continuous support of the public. As the court recessed for the panel to review the evidence and testimonies, Ethan and Lena held their children's hands as they left the courtroom, surrounded by sympathetic and encouraging looks from supporters. Though attacked on all fronts, The Parker family had held their ground and proved that they would not easily be subdued by injustice. When the Parker family left the courthouses to cheers and encouragement from supporters, public pressure began to elevate the case to a new level, no longer merely a legal dispute. The story of the Parker family had become a focal point across all forms of media. Those who had witnessed their persistence in the courtroom shared that experience with a renewed belief that justice could and should be fairly upheld. The entire community now watched and supported them, as if the Parker family story were their own. Articles, reports, and videos about the Parker family's case flooded the press in social media. Hashtags like "Justice for the Parkers" and "Just Stand Against Discrimination" continued to gain traction, spreading widely on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Thousands expressed outrage at the way the Parker family had been treated, and their story became a beacon for those who had endured discrimination. Human rights activists also began to speak out publicly, expressing support in calling for reform and service industries and the legal system. Both Lena and Ethan could feel the pressure and expectations of the public. A deep gratitude welled up within them, knowing they were not alone. But along with that was the tremendous responsibility they faced. Ethan knew that every step they took was not just for personal justice, but also for the voice of the community. Each night after the court sessions, Lena and Ethan would read messages from strangers, online people sharing stories, sending encouragement, and thanking them for standing up for fairness. However, the newfound fame brought unexpected challenges. Some articles from resort supporters began to emerge, aiming to flip the narrative and claim that the Parker family was overreacting or exploiting the situation. There were harsh, even prejudiced and malicious comments directly targeting the Parker family's race and their reason for choosing to fight publicly. Although these criticisms were in the minority, they did impact the family's psyche. Jackson and Emily, Lena and Ethan's two young children, also felt the tension and worry as they saw their parents under attack from negative opinions. Lena knew this was part of the battle they had to overcome. She tried to keep the family spirits high, reassuring her children that fairness is never easy to achieve and sometimes requires facing tough challenges. What our family is doing is right, and there are people who understand that, she told Jackson, holding him close. We are fighting not just for ourselves, but for others, so they will not have to endure this kind of injustice. Ethan, with the instincts of a seasoned agent, understood that protecting his family now meant not only facing the opposing side in the courtroom, but also how he and Lena maintained unity and resilience in every family member. He started organizing private conversations with each family member, helping everyone understand that, despite the difficulties, they would get through it together and could be proud of what they were doing. These small talks not only helped everyone feel steadier, but also created a family atmosphere filled with love and encouragement. With each passing day, the public pressure grew, and attention to the lawsuit spread further. Legislators and representatives from human rights organizations also began to take interest and join the fight. They did not stop at just observing. but also called for policy changes to ensure that all citizens would be treated fairly, regardless of skin color, background, or social status. A few representatives even publicly sent letters of support to the Parker family, promising to follow the case's developments closely and push for positive changes in services industries and the legal system. Lena and Ethan felt more strongly than ever that this lawsuit had grown beyond the scope of personal grievances. It was an opportunity to change how people viewed fairness and discrimination in society. Day by day, the Parker family not only became the center of attention, but also a source of inspiration for thousands. Their belief in justice and the value of fairness was no longer just their own belief, but had become a guiding light for the community. The Parker family entered the next day of the trial with a different spirit, a more intense determination, knowing that they were not only representing themselves, but also millions of people who believed in and followed them. Their fight was now not just to reclaim justice for themselves, but to send a clear message: injustice will never prevail when people stand together. The final day of the trial arrived, brimming with suspense and tension. The Parker family entered the courtroom with unwavering resolve, understanding that everything they had endured had led to this defining moment. Lena and Ethan not only represented their family, but also thousands of others out there who had suffered injustice and discrimination, and who had supported them tirelessly. Throughout this journey, the courtroom was packed, including journalists, human rights activists, and supporters, all eagerly awaiting the final verdict. As the trial began, the resort's lawyer delivered their closing arguments, trying to protect their client by reiterating points about security procedures and protecting the common rights of all customers. They sought to undermine the value of the Parker family's testimony, asserting that the resort's actions were not discriminatory and were merely an unfortunate misunderstanding. However, after months of intense work, the evidence and witnesses Lena had presented had weakened their arguments. The worried looks of the resort's legal team became apparent as they sensed that the panel's trust was leaning toward the Parker family. When it was her turn, Lena stood up, delivering her closing statement with a clear and incisive voice. She emphasized that although the resort had the right to ensure security, no one had the right to insult, harm, or discriminate against their customers. Lena recounted the painful moments her family had endured, from her children's fear to her and Ethan's own sense of humiliation. She affirmed that this lawsuit was not just about reclaiming fairness for her family, but about making it clear that everyone has the right to be treated with respect and fairness. In her closing words, Lena looked straight at the panel and said, "My family in the community that has stood beside us all hope for justice to be served. This is not just a personal lawsuit. This is a message that all people, regardless of skin color, status, or background, deserve to be treated fairly and respectfully." Her words resonated throughout the courtroom, touching hearts and creating an atmosphere of respect in the room. After a long period of discussion and deliberation, the panel returned to the courtroom to announce the verdict. All eyes focused on the judge, with Lena, Ethan, and their supporters holding their breath, awaiting the decisive moment. In the tense silence, the judge declared that the Parker family had won the lawsuit. The resort was required to publicly apologize, compensate for emotional and material damages, and implement anti-discrimination training programs for its employees. The courtroom erupted as the verdict was announced. The Parker family embraced each other in joy and relief. Tears streamed down Lena's cheeks as she felt that justice had finally prevailed. Ethan, with a gentle but determined smile, looked into his children's eyes, knowing that today had become a lesson in courage and resilience that the entire family would always remember. Jackson, their eldest, smiled proudly, realizing that his parents' fight had meant so much more. Shortly after the verdict, the news quickly spread through the media and social networks, praising the Parker family's victory as an important milestone in the fight against discrimination. Supporters and human rights activists continued to call for widespread policy change, emphasizing that this lawsuit was a vivid example, showing that anyone could stand up to reclaim fairness. This event sparked a larger dialogue on equality in everyone's rights, no matter who they are. Although victory was now in hand, Ethan and Lena understood this was only the beginning. This verdict was not only justice for the Parker family, but also a step forward in creating a better, more equal society. Both decided they would continue to work alongside human rights organizations to help families and individuals fighting for their rights. The battle had succeeded, but their mission continued. The Parker family left the courthouse proud, strong, and surrounded by supporters. Each family member knew that today was a day of justice, and one they would never forget. The Parker family's victory in court was not only a personal milestone, but also sparked a wave of calls for change. On a broader scale, the lawsuit quickly became a catalyst for discussions on legal reform, in the need for citizen protections. Right after the verdict, many human rights organizations, legislators, and even other resorts began to review their internal policies, especially those regarding security and customer service protocols. The resort, under pressure from public opinion in the court ruling, was not only required to conduct anti-discrimination training programs, but also had to establish an internal committee dedicated to monitoring and ensuring that all security and service protocols complied with fair standards. They announced plans to train all employees on equal treatment of customers, regardless of skin color or appearance, and pledged to increase oversight to prevent similar incidents in the future. The Parker family's case ruling also reached government agencies. In the legal community, some local representatives introduced new bills to strengthen civil rights regulations in the service industry and required all businesses to implement preventive measures against discrimination. Additionally, human rights organizations and activists continued to urge the government to consider more regulations to protect customer rights, especially in public service and hospitality settings. With unwavering determination, the Parker family decided they would not stop at their own victory. Lena began working with legal organizations to support other families facing similar cases. She agreed to participate in workshops and forums on civil rights, sharing her experiences and encouraging others not to remain silent in the face of injustice. In each talk, Lena emphasized the importance of perseverance, and how the law can be a powerful tool to protect the vulnerable. Ethan also got involved in community support activities, reaching out to former colleagues in the FBI and law enforcement to promote anti-discrimination awareness programs. He wanted law enforcement officials to be not only keepers of order, but also people who respect and protect everyone's rights. Through this, he hoped to create change from within, building an environment where families like his own would never have to suffer such pain again. Meanwhile, the surrounding community continued to express its support for the Parker family. Those who had followed the case from the beginning now saw them as symbols of courage and resolve. Many people sent letters, words of thanks, and even offered financial support for the projects the Parker family was working on. On social media, their story continued to be shared as a powerful testament to the strength of a community standing against injustice. Jackson and Emily, the Parker children, also learned valuable lessons from their parents' journey of struggle. Jackson, with a deeper understanding of justice and human rights, began to take an interest in social issues and hoped to contribute to the community in the future. Emily, though still young, now understood that even if the world is not always fair, she could be proud of her family, who stood up for what was right. With each small but firm step, the Parker family began a new journey. Their story was not a journey for justice, but also an inspiration for thousands of others. However, Ethan and Lena knew their mission was not over. The court victory was only the starting point. What they aimed for went far beyond. To build a society where everyone is respected and treated equally. Lena continued her legal work with a renewed spirit. She spent more time working with human rights organizations, not only defending families facing discrimination, but also promoting cultural awareness and workplace equality programs. In every new case and every time she stood before the court, Lena remembered the arduous journey her family had endured, making her stronger and more confident in the power of the law. Ethan, meanwhile, not only worked with human rights organizations, but also participated in various community activities within law enforcement. He collaborated with police departments and security training academies, organizing talks on discrimination awareness. With his practical experience as an FBI agent, he wanted to bring a fresh perspective to his former colleagues, helping them understand that maintaining security must go hand in hand with respecting human rights. Ethan's efforts helped change attitudes among many officers and security personnel, gradually creating a safer, fairer environment for everyone. With the community, the Parker family maintained a strong connection, and their story became a proud symbol. Lena's speeches, Ethan's conversations with security officers, and their appearances at social justice forums had a far-reaching impact, motivating many people to stand up for their rights. Jackson and Emily, the two young members of the family, became enthusiastic supporters of their parents. Jackson joined justice in human rights clubs at school, while Emily, though young, always held her parents' belief that everyone deserves to be treated fairly and respectfully. The Parker family continued to inspire others, and through their story, many families felt motivated to fight for themselves. Lena and Ethan knew they could not change the world overnight, but with each person they inspired, They got closer to a fair society. They were no longer a small, hurt family facing discrimination, but a symbol of resilience and faith in the power of justice. And so the Parker family continued on their journey. With unwavering love and pride, they had faced trials, stood up to injustice, and reclaimed fairness for themselves. But more than anything, they had become a guiding light for others. Their story is a powerful reminder that justice does not come naturally. It must be claimed, protected and passed down to future generations. Sometimes just one small step, one courageous voice can inspire thousands of others to stand up for what's right. If the Parker family story has touched you, click subscribe to the channel. You do not miss out on stories that continue to inspire. You do not miss out on stories that continue to inspire strength, courage, and belief in a fair world. Together we can build a loving community where everyone is respected and treated fairly.